I'm a man of my word. It's finally time for the complete artillery loadout guide. To start off, it's important to remember that you can only have 8 army slots available to your loadout. Fortunately for builds focused highly on artillery, you usually don't need ridiculous unit variation. This is because there's an artillery for almost anything, and you shouldn't need a ton of variation in your radio units. When it comes to infantry, you're going to need to make an important choice. You need to decide whether your loadout is going to focus on constantly spamming weak artillery or occasionally launching powerful artillery. When it comes to spamming, you'll be more effective against infantry, lightly armored units, and lowering enemy morale. Do note, you need a lot of units to spam artillery, so you're at high risk of losing large amounts of morale very fast, as well as your opponent. However, you have many more kinds of hybrid playstyles with spamming, since there are so many more available artillery units that fit in this category. I recommend using grunts or riflemen as your radio guys. Riflemen have much worse radio range, but are slightly cheaper. You should also consider the scout car because it's so cheap, and or the APC since it can carry your infantry while also having a radio itself. Artillery-wise, field guns, assault guns, rocket batteries, and rocket trucks are all good options with slight variations. Honestly, you could probably get away with consistently using 2 or more of these as main artillery sources since they're all rather cheap. Despite that, if you still end up usually having extra cash and extra radios, you can add the mortar for a little bit of free infantry damage. The easiest choice for the spamming type loadout build is the field gun. It's got a pretty affordable price tag while retaining good damage and great range. Make sure to remember that the field gun has a field direct attack, which allows it to shoot at nearby enemies without needing to use a radio. Also, the field direct attack has more than double the armor piercing of the normal attack. If you're on an attacking map or want some extra armor, I'd recommend making the switch to the mobile field gun, even though that adds a whopping 30 ticks to the price. In all cases though, the field guns having 2 attacks means you'll very rarely need to resupply them. The assault gun is also a great option for a spam-based loadout. Due to the destruction perk, it has a larger chance of destroying urban terrain while also dealing double damage against building units like bunker turrets. I'd recommend using it with lots of grunts though, since it's practically immune to machine guns, which grunts are weak to. With most loadouts, you're already going to have plenty of armor to deal with that issue, but when focusing on artillery, the assault gun is by far the best option when strictly speaking about armor. Just above it would be the mobile field gun, which has less armor and costs a little more. Assault gun is also good when paired with infantry because of its destruction perk, because it allows it to lessen the chance that the enemy infantry even has cover. Finally, the rocket battery and truck can also be a great staple of a spam artillery build. They deal huge damage to large numbers of infantry. Unfortunately, they pose almost no threat to armored units and have a relatively high chance of damaging whoever calls in a strike. Because of this, you want to pair them with armored units with radios, like the recon tank and recon car, or with any radio unit with lots of radio range like the sniper team. As usual, the rocket battery or the first evolution is preferable on defense due to its cheap price, while the rocket truck, the second evolution, is preferable on offense due to its mobility and increased firepower. Personally, I think these units work best as a secondary artillery source, so something else can deal with armor. However, they can be your main focus if you spare some cash for anti-armor units like RPGs. On the other side, we have focusing on bigger artillery. This makes it much easier to remotely deal with medium and even heavily armored units, as well as any kind of ambush units due to the higher end artillery pretty much always having huge range. When going with more expensive artillery, you won't need too many other units because you don't have enough artillery to actually use their radios. Do note that this isn't really a choice. If you want enough howitzers / bunker busters to be able to attack once or twice a turn, you'll have to cut some costs. Also, when using howitzers and bunker busters, you want to prioritize radios with larger ranges. For example, the sniper team is excellent with the howitzer because its huge radio range can fully take advantage of the howitzer's huge artillery range. On the other hand, using riflemen with howitzer or bunker buster basically just sentences them to death, since they only have one radio range and will therefore always be hit by the splash damage. Remember, this also applies to rocket battery and rocket truck, even though there's a tiny chance they won't damage the riflemen. Really, it's just not worth it. The howitzer and mobile howitzer are effectively the standard high-end artillery units. They do big damage while hitting multiple tiles at once. There isn't a ton that's unique to them other than the mobile howitzer having a machine gun, which further concretes it as superior for offensive operations compared to the normal, highly defensive normal howitzer. The bunker buster, if you've got the ticks to spare, is highly effective against buildings, making it great for dealing with pesky infantry trying to take cover. As it is an evolution of the assault gun, the bunker buster also has the destruction perk, but it has even better building damage. It can be effective in nearly all types of maps, but excels in defense maps with buildings since it can't move and attack on the same turn. The Bunker Buster does notably more damage, has notably higher armor, goes slightly less spaces, and costs much more than the Assault Gun. Specifically 50 ticks more than the Assault Gun's 90 ticks price tag. The Bunker Buster is usually going to be a staple of a loadout due to the higher stats and its splash damage, while the Assault Gun can be an extra in almost all artillery loadouts, even the higher end ones. Now, let's quickly go over some necessities you're going to want to save room in your loadout for, even if they aren't strictly based on artillery. First and foremost, you need a way of supplying your units. If you're using a more expensive artillery build, I highly recommend adding the supply carrier to one of your slots. Both the Howitzer and Bunker Buster hold very little ammunition, so the extra supplies goes a long way. Additionally, you won't likely need a high speed supplier for this kind of strategy since these units move extremely slow. I really mean that. The Bunker Buster moves like 2 tiles max. For a more spammery artillery loadout, you have 3 times as many options. The supply wagon, half-track, and truck are all completely valid. Though, typically the supply wagon is best when paired with loadouts using a lot of units, since you can mass produce it for cheap. So there's always supply nearby even if it's not a ton. This also gives you the option to save money on all those units. However, unlike the supply carrier with going with the heavy type builds, if you really want to switch the supply truck or half track rather than just using the wagon with your spam type build, it won't really make too much of a difference, so that's mostly preference based. Finally, you have to consider what map you're playing on. Non-naval units with radios simply don't have anti-air capabilities, so if there's going to be planes or you're playing PvP, it pays to have at least one anti-air unit even if you rarely get use out of it. Also, if you're playing a naval map, you might consider avoiding buying your normal artillery and instead rely on the ship artillery as it tends to have better stats and be invulnerable to land units. Well, it's finally done. Thanks so much for watching till the end. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.